Hey everybody! In today's video I want to talk about a classic synth concept which is called the
LFO.
LFO, which stands for Low Frequency Oscillator. And most importantly, I want to show how to create this effect in code using the Web Audio API. You can think of an LFO as sort of a utility tool which can be used to achieve some really interesting effects like vibrato and wah and tremolo. Here in particular, we're going to go into the tremolo type effect, and we're going to use it with an audio source that we pull in from our HTML with an audio tag. So let's get started. Now here we are in VS Code, and I have a simple HTML file here set up with some boilerplate code, and I'm linking to my app.js file here on line 9 in a script tag. And in my app.js file, I simply have a new audio context instantiated here on line 1, assigned to const ctx. And that gets us set up ready to get going with the Web Audio API. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come into my index.html file, and I need to actually pull in that audio file. So I have my audio file living here in this audio directory, and the file is called gtr.mp3, and this is a short recording I made of some guitar playing that I did. So let's come in here and let's create our audio tag. And we want to give it a source attribute. And we want to assign that source attribute to the audio file, the gtr.mp3 file, which lives in that audio directory. So we're going to say /audio, and gtr.mp3. And as well, I'm going to give it that controls attribute, which will give us some nice controls to work with out of the box. And here we can see those controls in the browser right here. We have our various audio controls ready and set up, and we can see that this is a 12-second sound sample right here. Let's turn the volume down a little bit, and let's play the file so that we can hear what we're working with. So let's get to what we're really here for. What we're trying to do is to take this pretty ordinary sounding guitar part and give it that cool tremolo treatment. And this is really the reason why I picked this guitar sample to work with. Electric guitar and tremolo go together just like peanut butter and jelly. So here's the plan. We first want to grab that audio element from our HTML and use the audio context createMediaElementSource method to turn it into an audio source node. And that will allow us to route it through the Web Audio API's node graph and apply the tremolo treatment to it. And by the way, I have another video here on the channel that goes into the createMediaElementSource method in a bit more detail. So let's go and grab that audio element from the HTML. Let's do document.querySelector, get the audio, and assign it to a const, which we'll call audio element. Now that we have that audio element, we want to turn it into a media element source node. And we can do that by calling the createMediaElementSource method on the audio context and passing in that audio element. And let's assign this to a const, which we'll call media element. Now that we have the audio element as a source node, we can connect it to our context.destination. Context.destination is basically an abstraction of your sound card out to your speakers. So we'll do mediaElement.connect context.destination. And here's where the LFO magic comes in. You see, the LFO effect will basically be achieved like this. We're going to create an oscillator that will be used solely to modulate the gain of our audio element, which is our guitar track. Now think of this oscillator as being a utility tool, because we're not actually going to hear this oscillator. We're just going to use it as the source of the pulsating gain modulation that we're going after. What is tremolo really after all? Basically, it's a modulation of the source signal's amplitude in a repetitive, periodic fashion, creating that pulsating effect. So the oscillator that we're going to create will be used solely to create that pulsation and amplitude. As the name low frequency oscillator implies, this oscillator is going to be set to a very low frequency. Typically, we're talking about frequencies of 20 Hz and under. Also, for the tremolo effect, we usually want to use either the sine type or the triangle type for the waveform, so that the pulsations will be nice and smooth, more or less, as opposed to something like the square waveform, which would produce more of a choppy effect. But let's get back to writing some code, and I think this will all become a lot clearer. So what we need to do first is create an oscillator node. Remember, that's going to be our modulator. So let's come in and do const osc for oscillator equals context.createOscillator. And then we want to create a gain node. And remember, this is what's going to be modulated by the oscillator. So we can do const, let's call it amp for amplitude. Set that equal to context.createGain. And by the way, the oscillator type is sine by default, so we're good with that right now. Let's just set the oscillator's frequency to a low value. Let's set it to 10 Hz for now. Now this part's really important. We need to do some rewiring here, so to speak. We actually want to take this media element here and route it through the amp or gain node first, and then connect that amp to the context.destination. So instead of media element connected to context.destination, let's connect the media element first to the amp, which is the gain node, and then let's take that amp and connect that to the context.destination. So now that the media element is set to go through this gain node here, if we modulate the gain node's gain value, we should be able to get that tremolo effect that we're looking for. So let's connect the oscillator itself to the gain node's gain param. So we're going to do osc.connect amp.gain. So as you can see, the sound from this oscillator is not actually ever routed to the context.destination. It's just used to modulate the amp or gain node's gain value. And then one last thing, which is really important. Don't forget that we'll need to start that oscillator. So we can do osc.start, and we'll start it immediately, so we can pass in 0. And now let's come to the browser, and let's play that same guitar track again, and we should be able to hear it with that tremolo effect. So I'll go ahead and turn the volume down a touch again, and let's play it and take a listen. So you can hear that fluttering tremolo effect now on the guitar. Let's try a different value for the frequency just for fun. Let's set it to something a lot slower. Let's say 3 Hz. And now let's take a listen to the effect that we have with the oscillator set at 3 Hz. So there you go. That's how you basically set up an LFO using the Web Audio API. In this video, we saw how we could take the audio tag from the HTML and turn that into a media element source. And then we were able to take that media element and route it through a gain node. And by hooking up an oscillator node to be used as a low frequency oscillator, we were able to modulate that gain node's gain param and achieve that cool pulsating tremolo effect. Now, of course, you can really experiment with this. Even though I said that sine and triangle were the two typical waveforms usually used with tremolo, go ahead and try square and sawtooth as well, and see what kind of difference that makes. Thanks for checking out this video. If you got something out of it, please consider subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you next time.